After 65, don't say these things about yourself in public. Have you ever regretted something you said, a comment you let slip in a social setting, thinking it was harmless at the time? Sometimes, what we casually share about ourselves becomes the very thing others use to define, limit, or even judge us. As we age beyond 65, our words carry a different weight. They color how the world perceives us, influences how others treat us, and ultimately shapes the quality of our remaining years. Yet, in a culture that increasingly encourages unbridled sharing, many of us find ourselves revealing aspects of our lives that silently erode our dignity, compromise our security, or diminish the respect we've spent decades earning. I'm Vernon. Today, I'll share 5 things of personal information that should never cross your lips in public settings after 65. Pay particular attention to the third one. It appears innocent on the surface, yet research shows it's the most damaging of all, creating ripple effects that can undermine relationships you've nurtured for decades. Before we begin, let me clarify. This isn't about secrecy or dishonesty. It's about practicing discernment, knowing which parts of your story empower you when shared, and which are better reserved for your trusted inner circle. In today's world, where even a casual chat can travel far beyond its origin, the line between public and private is thinner than ever. To keep growing with content that protects your dignity and sharpens your wisdom, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Are you ready to discover which aspects of your life deserve more protection than you might have been giving them? Let's begin with the first category that many seniors reveal too freely, often with consequences they never anticipated. Number 1. Financial vulnerabilities. When transparency becomes a liability. The dinner party had been delightful, good food, better wine, and conversation that danced effortlessly among the guests. Somewhere between dessert and coffee, I began sharing news of a recent windfall, the proceeds from selling my vacation property. With innocent enthusiasm, I spoke freely, mentioning the amount and my investment strategy. 2 months later, I became the target of a highly tailored investment scam, crafted with uncanny precision to exploit the very details I had casually revealed to near strangers. This wasn't just bad luck. It was a hard lesson in a truth few discuss openly. After 65, financial transparency can quietly turn from connection to exposure. Not only because scammers may be listening, though that risk is very real, but because even well-meaning acquaintances can unconsciously shift how they relate to us when money enters the picture. The Roman philosopher Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Yet in our modern lives, it is often the perception of what we have that shapes how others treat us, altering our social footing, our privacy, and sometimes our safety. A study by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found that seniors who discuss financial details in social settings, whether about inheritances, investments, or retirement funds, are 3 times more likely to face financial exploitation. And often, the source of that betrayal is someone they'd previously trusted. So, what's the alternative to oversharing? Behavioral economists suggest practicing strategic ambiguity, offering honest, general responses without disclosing specifics. Phrases like, "I'm grateful to feel secure," or "We've planned carefully over the years," strike a balance between transparency and protection. When conversations turn too pointed, I've found that a warm smile and a light response works wonders. That's a topic for my financial advisor, not the dinner table. Or, let's just say I'm not worried about coffee money. The line between appropriate sharing and risky exposure is rarely obvious until it's been crossed. But drawing that line, intentionally and early, maybe one of the most important forms of self-protection we exercise in our later years. If you found value in this insight, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit the like button. It helps others like you find this content and protect themselves too. Now, we turn to the second kind of information many people share too freely after 65, often without realizing the subtle cost. Number 2. Health complaints. We all love being seen, understood, and supported, especially when facing health challenges. But after 65, the way we talk about our physical well-being can carry unintended consequences. What we share, and how often we share it, subtly shapes how others define us. I've experienced this firsthand. After recovering from a long-term illness, I noticed that every casual "How are you?" became an invitation to retell the same difficult story. At first, it felt honest, even necessary. But over time, I began to sense a shift. People approached me less with opportunities and more with pity. I wasn't being seen as capable anymore. I was being managed. Aristotle once said that ethos, or the way others perceive our character, is the most persuasive force we have. When we consistently lead with our health struggles, we risk reshaping our identity from wise elder to person in decline. And once that perception sets in, it's incredibly hard to shift. Modern research backs this up. A study in the Journal of Applied Gerontology found that seniors who frequently share health complaints in professional or community settings are 42% less likely to be asked for input or leadership, even when fully capable. More alarming, this social withdrawal often accelerates mental and emotional decline. But what's the alternative? Silence? Not at all. Instead, try implementing a circle of trust approach. Reserve your most detailed, vulnerable updates for a small inner circle, those who truly know and care for you. In broader settings, shift the focus outward. Talk about books you've read, people you admire, ideas you're exploring. Let your presence be led by curiosity, not condition. Another technique I use is the 2-line rule. When asked how I'm doing, I acknowledge the truth, but pivot quickly. For example, I've had some challenges, but I'm staying active and excited about my garden project. You stay authentic, without allowing the illness to define the moment. Because ultimately, the goal is not to suppress your reality, but to reclaim your narrative. When you show up with purpose, others remember your presence, not your prescriptions. I'm curious, have you noticed how differently people respond to seniors who focus outward versus those who routinely center conversations on health challenges? Share your observations in the comments below. Your insight might help others recognize patterns in their own social interactions. Our next reflection explores a form of self-disclosure even more emotionally loaded. When personal family disappointments are shared in public, take a closer look at how these moments, though often well-intended, can quietly reshape both our relationships and reputations. Number 3. Family disappointments that damages multiple relationships. Among the various forms of self-disclosure that carry unintended consequences after 65, research consistently identifies one as the most quietly destructive: publicly sharing family disappointments, conflicts, or grievances. At first glance, such disclosures may seem harmless, perhaps even cathartic. But in reality, they often trigger ripple effects that extend far beyond the moment, silently eroding both our reputation and the relationships we may be hoping to heal. I'll never forget the retirement celebration of Elizabeth, a long-admired community volunteer. In her speech, she took what she later described as a small detour to express her lingering regret that her son hadn't followed in her footsteps into medicine. Her son, seated just a few feet away, held a polite smile on that didn't quite reach his eyes. That moment, though fleeting, reshaped how the room perceived both mother and son. What should have been a celebration of legacy became tinged with discomfort, and a quiet fracture in their relationship deepened. What Elizabeth intended as a moment of honesty had, in fact, revealed a wound she'd never intended to worsen in public. Harvard's Grant study found that after 65, publicly sharing family disappointments reduces the chance of reconciliation by 67%. Why? Because such disclosures often cause alliance ruptures, forcing others to take sides and leaving the family member feeling both betrayed and exposed. That doesn't mean we need to pretend everything is fine, but it does mean choosing our spaces and listeners wisely. A professional counselor, a longtime friend outside the family system, a private journal. These are the places where pain can be processed safely, without risk of public collateral damage. And in social settings, consider using what family therapists refer to as benevolent interpretation. Instead of saying, "My daughter never visits," you might say, "She's in a really intense season of life right now." It's not about denial. It's about choosing language that protects your relationships, your dignity, and your hope for future reconciliation. In fact, this kind of intentional reframing achieves several things at once. It preserves your loved one's dignity, maintains your standing in the community, and models the emotional wisdom that deepens others' respect for you. Looking back at the two earlier categories, financial vulnerability and health overexposure, we can now see how this third pattern magnifies both. Family disappointments that reveal financial tensions or health consequences compound the risks, often irreversibly. In every community I've worked with, the most deeply respected elders are those who speak of their families, with all their complexity, with measured grace, protective restraint, and quiet generosity of spirit. Number 4. Personal regrets. Preserving your legacy through selective storytelling. There's a quiet temptation that grows with age, the urge to publicly revisit old regrets, missed chances, and what could have beens. While reflecting on our past can offer wisdom, sharing too much of our personal regret in the wrong setting may unintentionally reshape how others remember us, not as resilient, but as resigned. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once said, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." That distinction matters. Sharing a regret without a forward-looking insight risks tethering both speaker and listener to a version of the past that no longer serves growth. Consider the late poet and civil rights icon Maya Angelou, who in her later years spoke candidly, but selectively, about painful chapters in her life. She never denied them, but she was careful to frame those moments through the lens of transformation. Rather than say, "I wish I hadn't," she often said, "I wouldn't take anything from my journey now." Her choice of words preserved her dignity while still offering truth and depth to her listeners. Research from narrative psychology shows that for people over 65, the stories we tell become the stories others remember about us. When those stories are anchored in regret without redemption, our wisdom risks being overshadowed by sorrow. What's the alternative? Practice redemptive storytelling. As my friend Catherine puts it, never leave your story in the valley. Climb to the vista, even if the path was winding. Focus on what the experience taught you, how it shaped your values, or how it helped others. This doesn't mean ignoring pain or pretending all things end well. It means owning your story in a way that affirms life rather than collapses into disappointment. Your legacy deserves that level of care. As we prepare to explore the fifth and final category of self-disclosure own, with implications for physical and emotional safety, consider this. Are your stories reflecting who you've become, or just where you've been? Have you found creative ways to share your life experiences without dwelling on regrets? I'd love to hear your approaches in the comments section below. Your insight might offer exactly the perspective someone else needs today. Number 5. Security details. Protecting your physical and digital doorways. Our final category of information that should remain private after 65 involves the subtle yet serious matter of security details, both physical and digital. These are not just facts about our lives. They are potential entry points for those who seek to take advantage. The ancient strategist Sun Tzu warned, "Be extremely subtle, even to the point of formlessness." While he spoke of warfare, this advice is surprisingly apt in today's world, where oversharing seemingly harmless details can expose us to real risk, especially as we age and may be perceived as more vulnerable. Think about how casually we might mention upcoming travel, where the spare key is hidden, or even which rooms of our home remain unlocked. Or, online, how we manage our bank accounts, common password habits, or even how we usually verify our identity. These disclosures, often made in passing, often to acquaintances rather than close friends, can become liabilities we never anticipated. The National Institute on Aging found that seniors who publicly disclose personal security habits are over 4 times more likely to experience theft or digital fraud. And yet, they are statistically more likely than younger adults to share these very details in friendly conversation. Take Sir Ian McKellen, now in his 80s. In an interview years ago, he spoke candidly about becoming more cautious with public disclosures after a break-in at his London home. While nothing of great value was taken, the emotional toll and disruption taught him the hard way that even a simple comment about being off to the theater for the weekend had reached the wrong ears. Since then, he's adopted a quieter approach to logistics and personal planning, choosing privacy not out of fear, but wisdom. This isn't about living in fear. It's about living with intention. Here are a few guidelines worth keeping in mind. Travel plans. Share only with trusted individuals who have a reason to know. Home security. Never mention alarm systems, key locations, or entry patterns in public conversations. Financial habits. Keep banking routines and authentication practices completely private. Digital safety. Avoid discussing passwords, PINs, or any "I usually do this when I log in" commentary. You don't have to justify these boundaries. A gentle redirection like, "That's not something I talk about publicly," or "Let's just say my family keeps our bases covered," communicates protection without paranoia. Because in today's world, discretion isn't just polite. It's a form of self-defense. The art of meaningful conversation without oversharing. Looking across all 5 categories we've discussed: financial vulnerability, health complaints, family disappointments, personal regrets, and security details, a unifying principle emerges. The information that deserves the greatest protection after 65 is precisely that which could be used to diminish our autonomy, dignity, or security. As we draw our exploration to a close, you might be wondering, if these 5 topics should be protected from public discussion, what remains to talk about? How do I engage authentically without revealing vulnerable aspects of my life? This concern reflects a common misconception that meaningful connection requires complete transparency. Yet the wisest conversationalists I've known, particularly in their later years, practice what philosophers call selective authenticity, the art of being genuinely present while thoughtfully choosing which aspects of experience to share in which contexts. Rather than speaking about financial details, I discuss economic principles I've observed throughout my lifetime. Rather than cataloging health complaints, I share insights about maintaining vitality through life's challenges. Instead of airing family disappointments, I reflect on patterns of intergenerational communication I've witnessed. Rather than dwelling on personal regrets, I offer lessons learned from pivotal decisions. And rather than revealing security vulnerabilities, I discuss broader social changes I've observed over decades. Conclusion: simple practices for dignified self-expression. The poet Mary Oliver asked, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Even, perhaps especially after 65, this question retains its power and urgency. The 5 things we've explored today can help ensure that your answer remains truly yours to determine, uncompromised by careless self-disclosure. Before we part, I'd like to leave you with a final thought. These guidelines aren't about concealment or pretense. They're about curation, thoughtfully selecting which aspects of your rich and complex life story to share in which settings. Because the truth is, you've earned the right to be known on your own terms, to be respected for your wisdom rather than defined by your vulnerabilities, and to protect the dignity of the life you've worked so long to build. Take a moment to subscribe to my channel to continue receiving thoughtful reflections like these, created to support a life of clarity, dignity, and purpose. And don't hesitate to like and share this video with someone who might be carrying the same quiet questions. A little insight, passed along, can go a long way. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of dignified self-expression in our later years.